You're listening to a 3CR podcast created in the studios of independent community radio station 3CR in Melbourne, Australia. For more information, go to allthews.3cr.org.au.
Slavery is back.
Welcome to a place where private business profit from a captive labour force, yet pennies are spent on medical services to a population in which the Indigenous, the poor and the mentally ill are overrepresented. Where isolation, humiliation and degradation are facts of life. Welcome to prison.
It depends who's telling the story, I suppose. The prisoners would have one view, the people who work in the prison system would have another, and I think it's up to people to decide where the truth is.
Give government propaganda and the media spin doctors the flick. And check out Dointime for news, views and tunes on prison issues from Guantanamo Bay to Christmas Island to prisons and detention centres everywhere. Every Monday at 4 p.m. on your community radio 3CR.
We are still fired up and we're still talking about revolution.
Hello and welcome to the Dointime show. This is 3CR Community Radio, 855 AM on the dial, streaming live on www.3cr.org.au. And a warning that this episode of Dointime contains audio images of Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander people that have died and graphic discussion of deaths in custody. This is Marissa and I will be with you for the next hour. Today on the show we will bring you an interview with David Glan from the Refugee Action Collective Vic about two events. Monday the 10th of August, 6:30 p.m. at the Kathleen Syme Library in Carlton, a Refugee Action Collective forum, busting the racist myths about refugees. And David will talk more about that in more detail. And the second event that we'll talk about is Wednesday the 9th of September, 6:30 p.m. at Trades Hall. And it's a Unite Against Racism forum, Don't Let the Racists Divide Us, building the fight against one nation. So David will speak about that in a lot more detail and we'll speak about the background to all that. After that, we will yarn with Maggie Munn, a Gunggari person and the Director of First Nations Justice at the Human Rights Law Centre. Maggie will share with us new data showing that Australia's racist youth justice policies are failing First Nations kids. Essentially, all governments across Australia need to work on changing dangerous and discriminatory laws hurting First Nations children, families and communities. We will also be discussing a new report, With Us, Not Against Us, a systemic inquiry to learn from the experiences of children who enter the criminal justice system before 14, Commission for Children and Young People, 2026. With racism on the rise in Australia and one nation reaping the rewards, I will be speaking with David Glan from the Refugee Action Collective Vic about two major events happening over the next month or two. But first, we will go to an announcement.
Join public housing residents fighting to save their homes from demolition. Residents from across Naarm are demanding to meet Housing Minister to hand deliver a petition to save the high rises they have called home for decades. Join us outside Nick Starkos's office, 1 Spring Street, Wednesday the 5th of August, 12:30 p.m, to hear directly from the residents. Show them we support their struggle. Nick Starkos's office, 1 Spring Street, Wednesday the 5th of August, 12:30 p.m. Follow 44 Houses United on Instagram for updates. 44 Flats United is a 3CR supporter.
And you're tuned into the Dointime show, 3CR Community Radio show. Community Radio Dointime show. Hello, David. Welcome to the program.
Hi, Marissa. How are you?
Lovely to have you. Not bad, thanks, considering all the global atrocities that are happening in the world.
Yes, there's a lot of bad stuff going on, but there's also a lot of resistance around the world as well, including right here in Naarm. So we mustn't forget that.
And you are one of those resistors. And, I'd like to welcome you to the program. So I'm wondering, David, if you could just talk about the events that are coming up, organised by the Refugee Action Collective, and discuss a little bit of background about each of them.
Yeah, sure. Well, I think that the background in some ways is the same. It's the rise of One Nation. People are quite rightly extremely concerned about the way that One Nation has jumped from 6% at the last federal election to, depending on which opinion poll you look at, 25, even up to 30%. They've had MPs elected in the South Australia. They won the Farrer by-election, and now they're challenging in Victoria in the state election, which is on Saturday, November the 28th. Not that far away. And there is a real possibility that Labor will lose to a coalition of the Liberal Party and One Nation. And we don't know which will be the bigger Conservative Party. We don't want this to happen, but if it happens, One Nation could well be part of our next government before Christmas. And people are quite worried about this for good reason. It would be a horrible lurch into reaction. It would have enormous implications for all progressive people, migrants, refugees, Indigenous people, working class people in Victoria. So the Refugee Action Collective is making a contribution to the campaign against Hanson. The first one next Monday, Monday the 10th, is a forum which we're putting on by ourselves, which is busting the racist myths about refugees, because obviously part of taking on the racists is actually confronting their ideas. So the arguments that refugees are flooding in, they're taking jobs, they're changing Australia for the worst, all those sorts of arguments, we should be taking them on and actually one by one and actually providing a reality, evidence-based argument about why this isn't the case. And so I think that will be an interesting discussion, because the speakers will probably cover, 6 or 8 different topics, but I'm sure there will be other things that people can contribute in the discussion. So I'd invite
tonight,
people to come.
Isn't it, David? Is that tonight?
That's next week. No, next
week,
Monday.
I'm sorry.
Next Monday, Monday the 10th, at the Kathleen Syme Library at 6:30, and we welcome people along. But the second event, in some ways, is a bit more significant. And Refugee Action Collective has helped bring together a coalition of anti-racist and pro-Palestine organisations under the banner of Unite Against Racism. And this has been building up for quite some time. We had a rally in September last year, which actually got a good turnout, 500 people. Then we had a forum at Trades Hall in February with a very big speaking platform, a very diverse speaking platform, and that attracted 200 people. And we want to, in a sense, repeat that, but in a much more focused way on Wednesday, the 9th of September. So again, we'll be at Trades Hall. Again, we're hoping to pack out Solidarity Hall. But this one will be much more tightly focused on how can we work together to stop One Nation. And we have 3 speakers organised so far, but we're hoping to get 2 more. But the 3 speakers we have so far are Radi Baslot, who is a Tamil refugee and a co-founder of Refugee Women Action for Visa Equality. And I'm sure many people listening to this show will have heard Radi speak before at forums, online or at rallies. She's a fantastic speaker who has been through horrific experiences but continues to be a fighter. We also have Imam Allah El-Sokom, who is the Imam of the mosque at Heidelberg Heights, and he has spoken out publicly against One Nation, and I know I've heard him speak before. He's a very good speaker. Will bring, obviously, a perspective from the Muslim community to the meeting. And then the third confirmed speaker at this point is Lucy Honan, who is an Australian Education Union counsellor, a member of the rank and file group Fight the Crisis, and has been very prominent in the teachers' campaign. And if we're talking about standing up to One Nation, we need to make it absolutely clear that we reject their racism, but we also need to make it clear that we reject their big business agenda, which is anti-union, anti-working class, where Pauline Hanson is pals with Gina Reinhardt, Australia's richest person, but thinks the rest of us are lazy and it should be easier for our bosses to sack us. So Lucy will talk about how it's possible to fight for a solution to the cost of living crisis, which doesn't involve punching down against refugees or migrants or trans people or Indigenous people, but involves uniting workers to fight for their interests. So those are the three speakers. We're hoping to get another couple of excellent speakers, and we'll announce those as soon as with those names are confirmed.
Indeed, and so both events that are happening are really about raising awareness, isn't it?
Yeah, raising awareness around One Nation, debunking their racist arguments, and bringing people together who are prepared to take action. So Unite Against Racism has drafted a leaflet, which is currently with our graphic designers. We've launched a public funding campaign today on Chuffed, and we're hoping to raise thousands of dollars so that we can print tens of thousands of this leaflet, and it will be available for any group or any individual to use in their workplace, their community, in their letterboxing down their street, to hand out on stalls or at rallies. We want to get those leaflets out there in very large numbers and contribute to making people who are very angry with Labor and the Liberals, very angry about the cost of living crisis and the housing crisis. We want some of those people to think twice and go, maybe Pauline Hanson isn't the alternative that I thought she was. And if we can contribute to people thinking twice and taking their vote from One Nation and putting it somewhere else, and our slogan will be put One Nation last, then we will feel that we've contributed something worthwhile.
You know, with the Victorian election, how is that going to happen? Because there are no candidates in Victoria for First Nations.
From One Nation or First Nations?
One Nation.
One Nation. Actually, Hanson has just announced her candidates in the upper house. It was in the Age this morning with her candidates, and she's actually having an event in about an hour and a half's time in Hawthorne to promote those candidates at an event which is very cost effective for the battlers. It's $120 to get in. So every time she holds an event, it's basically for wealthy people to get together and talk about how bad unions are and how lazy workers are and all the rest of it. She's having an event in Hawthorne tonight, and there will be a protest outside at, I think, 5 o'clock onwards. So she hasn't, and she's announcing her lower house candidates apparently quite soon. So we will find who might be, in the worst case scenario, the leader of One Nation in the lower house, maybe the Premier or the Deputy Premier. And we're going to do everything we can to make sure this isn't going to happen. And we're not alone. The Victorian Trades Hall Council has launched a major campaign against One Nation. Last week, 300 union activists were out outside train stations across the network handing out information about One Nation. And I know Trades Hall has a whole program of letterboxing, street stalls, leafleting, and so on. We're not counterposing. Unite Against Racism isn't counterposing what we're doing. We're hoping to work in with that and be part of a bigger effort to prevent One Nation getting a serious foothold in Victoria.
David, you've had a very long history of being in the Refugee Action Collective Vic and also in activism in general. For any new listeners that have tuned in who really don't know anything, perhaps don't know anything about One Nation, what do you think are the things that are making One Nation Party increase? What are the issues, do you think, that are making members of the community to go towards that party?
Yeah. I think there are two clear factors. The first is that people are really hurting with the cost of living crisis and the housing crisis. Average wages in Australia, real wages, I don't mean nominal wages, but the amount you've got that actually buys stuff, real wages have fallen by 5% in Australia. Workers don't just feel worse off, they are worse off. And of course, house prices, mortgages, rents have just skyrocketed. So people are very, very angry, and they are completely right to be angry. They've been let down by Labor governments and Liberal governments, and I think people are so angry that some of them feel that even though Pauline Hanson, is a bit of a dingbat, that they're going to give her a go because the mainstream alternatives are so bad. I think the second reason why they're getting a hearing is that the mainstream parties, and that's Labor and Liberal, actually keep on talking up anti-migrant language. So it's actually not just One Nation that's saying that migrants are a problem with the housing crisis. It's not that. It's actually Labor has said it's going to reduce migration to deal with the housing crisis. So when Labor says it in government, it encourages the idea that migrants are a problem. Actually, Labor could be building public housing. That's what, for decades, governments did in this country. They built houses. Now they don't do that, and instead they turn around and say migrants are a problem. And then Pauline Hanson can say, oh, you're saying that today. I was saying it 30 years ago, and she gets some credibility. One Nation talks about deporting migrants. Labor is already deporting migrants and has introduced legislation that the Refugee Council puts 70,000 people at risk of deportation. So the racism that Pauline Hanson loves actually is being encouraged from the top by the federal government, by the various state governments, by Angus Taylor, the leader of the Liberal Party, who said, if you're not a citizen, if he becomes Prime Minister, if you're not a citizen, then you won't have access to Medicare or welfare. So people who are permanent residents, who have lived in this country for decades, have paid taxes, under the Liberals would lose access to Medicare and welfare. And that just encourages the idea that foreigners, migrants, whatever you want to call them, are a problem. And they're not the people who are keeping wages down. It's not migrants who keep wages down. It's not migrants that stop governments from building public housing. It's not migrants who are leading to Labor cutting hundreds of thousands of people off the NDIS. It's governments which put the profits of the billionaires ahead of the interests of ordinary people. And I think we want to get people to think twice. We'd much rather they supported progressive alternatives to Labor and the Liberals. But the one thing we want them to do is to put One Nation last, because if One Nation has a breakthrough, like various far-right parties have had a breakthrough in Britain and Germany and France and Italy, if they break through and become a big part of our political life, it will encourage a much deeper racism in our society against refugees and migrants, people of colour, Indigenous people, Muslims in particular. So the stakes are quite high. So please, if you're listening to this and you want to find out more, come along to Trades Hall on Wednesday, the 9th of September at 6:30. It's free to come in. We'll take donations at the door, but if you've got no money, we're certainly not going to stop you coming in. Come along, hear 5 great speakers, and get involved in the campaign to stop the racists in their tracks.
David, thank you so much for coming onto the program. It's been lovely having you. And you've explained things so well, and I appreciate that. And also, before you go, I wanted to thank you once again for your donation for Radiothon for the Dointime show, and we did meet our target.
Fantastic. Very, very well deserved, and I'm pleased I made a modest contribution to you getting there.
You were wonderful. Thank you, David. Thanks a lot. Okay, well, we'll be in touch soon, I'm sure, in the near future. And good luck with the events. Thanks a lot.
Thanks, Marissa. Bye.
Bye-bye.
You're listening to 3CR, an apartheid-free zone. 3CR's Committee of Management has passed a declaration formalising our commitment to a free Palestine. As an apartheid-free zone, we're committed to boycotting Israel's regime of oppression. We stand firmly against apartheid in Palestine and encourage other organisations to join us in this struggle. Visit our website to read the full declaration and learn more about our commitment to justice and liberation for Palestine and the apartheid-free zone movement.
And you're tuned into the Dointime show, 3CR Community Radio, and you just heard a very important extended interview with David Glan, and he was speaking about a couple of events that are coming up with the Refugee Action Collective, with the rise of racism in Australia, and looking at building against One Nation and other issues in regards to refugees. And now we're going to be going to a song before our next interview.
She was a young girl from a mission town, spoke a language that was hard to learn, and she didn't know much about the world of the Western society. Her mom was the skin of the blanket of the night. The stars were inside her so she could follow the light back home to where she belonged. I know how it feels to be so far away from the life you've come to live. Hey, life, I know you want to cry, but the winds will guide you back to mother, to mother, to mother. Oh, why, oh, why, oh, why, to mother, to mother. She was in the toilets one afternoon. These girls walked in, older by a few years. They told her things that weren't true. Because of her mother, they hated her too. They pushed her around and spat on her face. They laughed and mocked her, she knew it had to stop. Back to back with two of her friends, she fought the sadness right through to the end. They were laying on the bathroom floor. The words they said never left a scar. Hey, love, I know how it feels to be so far away from the life you've come to live. Hey, life, I know you want to cry, but the winds will guide you back to mother, to mother, to mother. Oh, why? Oh, why? Oh, why? To mother, to mother.
So we already know the harms of Australia's offshore detention regime, and yet instead of closing down that offshore processing regime, the Albanese government is seeking to expand it.
3CR, your station, your voice.
Every day, people in prisons across Australia are subjected to strip searching. It is an unnecessary, degrading and deeply harmful practice that must end. It involves a person literally being stripped of their dignity, forced to remove their clothing for their bodies to be inspected by prison guards, being forced to submit to humiliating requests like bending, squatting and spreading their legs. In many prisons, people are subjected to this repeatedly and routinely. Children as young as 10 years old are being forced to remove their clothes and have their bodies inspected by adults. We're calling on the federal government to stop state-sanctioned violence by ending the routine, unregulated use of strip searching in prisons across Australia. Go to endstripsearching.com. Together, we can demand a system that upholds dignity, safety and human rights. Big Jam is a 3CR supporter.
Just how this will end. Everything is great until it's not. Everything is great until it stops, till it stops. And if it's not you, it's someone else you see. So I definitely shouldn't let you bother me. I don't want more, I just wanna be enough. No, I don't want more, I just wanna be enough. Please tell me what the fuck we're doing. I don't know if I should be moving on. Am I lonely or do I really love you? Am I lonely or do I love you? Talking on the phone at night again, you say, hey man, just like we're friends. You keep me safe and warm, I wish you wouldn't. You keep me safe and warm, just like he could. Please tell me what the fuck we're doing. I don't know if I should be moving on. Am I lonely or do I really love you? Am I lonely or do I really love you?
Are you ready to get lost in science this National Science Week? We'll join the Lost in Science team for our annual Trivia Night extravaganza at the Birmingham Hotel, a hop, skip and a jump away from 3CR on the corner of Smith and Johnson Streets in Fitzroy. Presented by the Lost in Science team with new and old science questions across a range of topics, picture rounds, group activities and prizes big and small to be won by you and your team. At the Birmi, corner of Smith and Johnson Streets, Fitzroy. That date again, Monday 17th of August. To get your tickets, you can look up Lost in Science Trivia 2026 online or head to 3CR's website, 3cr.org.au. Get lost in science during National Science Week.
And you're tuned into the Dointime show, 3CR Community Radio 855 AM on the dial. And you just heard a couple of songs, Hey Love by Emily Waramata and Alice Skye, Everything is Great, two wonderful First Nations musicians. The Productivity Commission's latest Closing the Gap report shows a rise in First Nations young people held in detention without sentence, with Australia failing to make any progress on targets to reduce the rate of First Nations children behind bars. States and territories continue to detain children on remand at increasing rates in direct contra-intervention of international law. I'm delighted to introduce Maggie Munn, and they will speak about what land they're from, as I think that's a lot more personal that way. Maggie is a Director of First Nations Justice at the Human Rights Law Centre, and I will be yarning with them about all this and also discussing a new report by the Victorian Commission for Children and Young People, which exposes the extreme harm the youth justice system is inflicting on young people, with multiple reports of children being physically and verbally assaulted whilst in custody. Our yarn will specifically also briefly look at the removal of the child placement principles in the Northern Territory after the recent atrocious youth law legislation. But first, I'd like to welcome Maggie to the program. Hello, Maggie.
Hi, Marissa. Great to yarn with you again. How are you?
I'm good, thanks. I'm okay, considering the circumstances of what's been going on in the world. We have to be positive, isn't it?
That's it. We've got to keep on trucking.
Yeah. So this is a great media release from the Human Rights Law Centre. Can you tell us about what's going on with Australia's racist youth justice policies?
Yeah, absolutely I can, and I feel like over the years, Marissa, we've had many similar yarns to the one that we're about to have. As you mentioned, the Productivity Commission released their latest report just last week on the progress that governments around the country are making or largely not making with respect to closing the gap. And in that report, it showed that a number of the closing the gap targets, we're not on track to meet any of them, and in a lot of instances we're actually, making negative progress, so falling backwards. And particularly of note is the huge increase in Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander young people who are being held in detention without sentence, and that's really problematic, and it's really harmful for these kids who, are owed the right to sort of, be in their communities and go through the court system process. But in all of the states and territories, and most of the states and territories, in fact, Aboriginal kids are being held in detention without being sentenced, which is something that the Human Rights Law Centre and many Aboriginal legal organisations and advocacy organisations have been making a lot of noise about for a really long time, and it's something that needs to change because putting our babies in those circumstances, those situations, is really harmful for them, and they deserve better.
But there have been so many reports written, and what will happen now, Maggie? Where to from here?
Yeah, it's a great question, and one that kind of keeps me awake at night, certainly. I feel like for a lot of lawyers, a lot of advocates, a lot of practitioners and experts have sort of challenged Australia's youth justice laws and policies through every avenue that we have available. Just last year, the Human Rights Law Centre partnered with Professor Megan Davis and Associate Professor Hannah McGlade to complain to the United Nations about the trajectory of Australia's youth justice laws being really quite racist and discriminatory, and the United Nations Committee on the Elimination of Racial Discrimination found that actually, there is a pattern of racial discrimination, and we've made noise at every possible avenue that we can for what feels like a really, really long time, and governments are just continuing to pass these laws and introduce these policies that really target our children, have a really detrimental impact on our kids, on their families, on our communities. It's hard to know what the next step is, but I really hope that, through continued advocacy and getting out there in front of media, in front of politicians, that we can start to convince them that actually, you've got the evidence on your desks of what works, and we know how harmful prison is, and these governments know how harmful prison is for our kids, and yet they continue to expose them to that sort of trauma. It's certainly a frustrating task to have to go toe-to-toe and demand that governments stop playing politics with our kids' lives, but it's something that's really necessary until these laws and these policies change. We want what's best for our kids, and what governments are exposing them to, is not it.
At this point, could you just tell us what land you're from, Maggie?
Oh, yeah, of course. Sorry.
Okay.
I'm calling in from the beautiful lands of the Wadawurrung people down in Geelong, but I'm a Gunggari person from southwest Queensland, now living down here in Victoria.
Wonderful. It's always good, isn't it, for people to know the lands on which people come from and where they live.
Yeah, absolutely. It's important. It feels more important, now than ever, when we're seeing governments and people who are trying to get into government want to decrease the rights of Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander people and, distract us from important gains that have been made, particularly here in Victoria with respect to treaty. And there's a lot of people who want to see that progress wound back. And so it feels particularly important in this moment to really acknowledge, the traditional owners and the beautiful custodians of country that we're all on.
Exactly. Maggie, of particular concern, I've just had a look here at the media release, and it appears that the Human Rights Law Centre supports the Commission's calls for the Victorian Government to overhaul its hardline approach to youth crime. And you've talked a little bit about that, haven't you? But I think it's also important, isn't it, to look at the national aspect as well, because this is also a federal issue, isn't it?
Yeah, absolutely. And, there's been this really downward kind of spiral, I guess, in the states and territories for a number of years to introduce really harsh, really punitive law and policy that target Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander children, whether intentionally or not. That's the very real impact that we're seeing. The Victorian kind of tough on crime laws are just a carbon copy of what Queensland passed in 2024, and we're seeing that kind of shift all across the country. These sort of laws that are really knee-jerk kind of reactions to things, but do nothing to actually support children and their families who are engaging in this kind of behaviour. It's just a quick and easy sort of thing for governments to do, and the federal government the Albanese government has the ability to sort of intervene and stop these things from happening, and yet are seemingly refusing to. And that's really concerning when governments choose not to act on things that are causing real harm to young, children as young as 10 in some places. These are little kids that we're talking about who are exposed to these systems and often, are trapped in these systems, and we want to change that. And absolutely the report from the Victorian Commission for Children and Young People, made some really strong recommendations, some really strong calls to overhaul the system.
Tell us about those recommendations.
So the report itself is really quite lengthy. It's called With Us, Not Against Us, and it's looking at, I guess, all of the things that we can hear directly from children who have been in the criminal legal system at that young age, and they list a bunch of really strong recommendations. They're certainly not new recommendations. I feel like, children's rights advocates, Aboriginal advocates, for a long time have been calling for exactly these things. And some of the recommendations, seem like really common sense things, making sure that children and young people who are impacted and involved and interact with the criminal legal system, that their voices are centred throughout kind of any of the, I guess, solutions to what we're experiencing, that we're looking at things, alternatives to the criminal legal system, alternatives to kind of, carceral sentencing, punitive sentencing, that we're looking at ways for, the interaction between child protection or out-of-home care, the criminal legal system, schooling, all of those sorts of things, that there's kind of a little bit more consistency there, because we know, and it has been really well documented for a long time, that there is a lot of overlap between kids who are in care and who are in the criminal legal system, or who end up in the criminal legal system. So trying to understand, what is causing that kind of overlap, and making sure that, government agencies and care agencies are really supporting kids at the earliest possible point. They're looking, I guess, for a lot of support and investment in place-based youth hubs. There's not a lot of kind of places for children to go around Victoria when their home might not be safe, or they want to engage in activities and things like that. So making sure that there is support for good activities that children want to be engaged in, that might keep them kind of out of some of the offending behaviour that they're getting captured in the system by. So it's really a whole lot of recommendations. There's quite a few in there. None of them are new. It's what we've all been calling for a really long time. They're really common sense based things. But the beauty of this report is that it actually does really centre the voices of the children who have been in the legal system, from an early age, and making sure that what matters to them and the impact of these systems and laws and policies on them are really heard, and that's absolutely critical when we're doing this kind of work.
Absolutely, and as you've been talking, Maggie, I've been thinking about the history of the Dointime show, who really reflects lived experience and doing a lot of Aboriginal-led interviews, and always taking the show back to colonisation. And I think one of the things that is really quite atrocious here is about how deaths in custody have not gone down, and the recommendations of the Royal Commission into Aboriginal deaths in custody have not been upheld. And you've also got little children, haven't you? Someone to give an example, like Auntie Vicky Roach, where she was actually in as a small child, wasn't she, as a ward of the state, genocide, and then for her to be entrenched in the criminal justice system.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think that's the root cause of a lot of what we're experiencing. Colonisation never ended. It's an ongoing thing. The stolen generations never really ended. We're just seeing children removed by a different system. We're seeing that kind of colonial intent play out through law and policies in 2026 that, target Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander children, that make it harder for Aboriginal adults to gain access to bail. We're seeing all of the same colonial tactics play out just in a different way in 2026. And it's really, that's a really hard thing to sit with as an advocate, but it's absolutely essential that we continue to, make noise and fight back against these laws and policies, because our people deserve better. We're still here, we're still fighting, we're tough, we're resilient, and we need to make sure that we continue to be, even in the face of laws and policies that seek to really kind of try and keep us down.
Absolutely. Now, Maggie, I understand that you can't talk too much about the Northern Territory because, I actually have plans perhaps to interview some elders from over there. But I did want to ask, we've touched a little bit on stolen generation, but is it okay if I just ask you a very brief general question just about the removal of the child placement principle in the Northern Territory after the recent atrocious youth law legislation as a result of what happened to Kumanjai Baby?
Yeah, of course. And the reason sort of I'm not best placed to speak about it in great detail is because I'm not from that country.
Of course not.
There's a lot of really incredible advocacy being done by community and Aboriginal legal services like NAJA up there to really push back against the government, passing these laws. And what the CLP government in the Northern Territory are doing is really outrageous. The removal of the child placement principle is really harmful. That's something that, has been informed not just by best practice and evidence, but something that comes from who we are as Aboriginal people is keeping
What is
our
it
families
exactly?
together.
What is the child placement principle?
The child placement principle is, it was in law that if a child is to be removed from their family, that there's kind of an order, I guess, of where those children are placed, and it kind of follows the kinship care sort of, I guess, methodology, if you will, and it speaks that an Aboriginal child being removed from their family will be placed with another Aboriginal family member. If that's not possible, then they'll be placed with another Aboriginal family or Aboriginal community. If that's not possible, only at an absolute last resort will they be placed with a non-Aboriginal carer. And the Northern Territory government's new law has kind of wiped the Aboriginal child placement principle and made it kind of a principle for all children, and really removed the depth of kinship care, of community care from that principle, and what that means, I guess, in practice, and noting I'm not from the Territory, of course, but what that means in practice is that there's that sever of cultural tie, and that sever of community and kinship that Aboriginal people rely on, and that is especially important culturally, socially, spiritually for our kids to stay grounded with their community and with their people. So for the government to just wipe that is really, it's pretty offensive actually, but it's also really harmful, and it's concerning about what that will do, in terms of Aboriginal children being removed and not placed with Aboriginal family or community or other Aboriginal people. So it's really unfair. It's really a kick in the teeth to, community up there who have fought for so long for, the best practice for our kids and our communities. It's a real, I think it's really devastating. My heart goes out to the mob up there who have been trying to make sure that the government doesn't do this, and then to see them do that and fly in the face of, all of the best practice, but also the importance of what Aboriginal people in the Territory know works for them is just, it's really frustrating.
I mean, thank you so much, Maggie, for talking about this, because this really does, and I don't believe is actually compromising anything at all in regards to you not being from that country, because we're really just speaking quite generally, and it really does have quite far-reaching consequences and does have set a dangerous precedent to be assimilating First Nations communities even further.
Yeah, you're right. And what we've seen sort of over the last kind of, 2, 3, 5 years is that when one state or territory kind of cracks down on a particular thing, we see other states and territories replicate or, do a carbon copy of what it is that they're doing. Victoria copied the tough on crime, adult crime laws that Queensland passed, which was kind of an extension of some of the things that the Northern Territory government had done as well. So we're seeing this kind of trend happen where one state or one territory will pass these really horrible laws that are really harmful, really problematic, that have a really disproportionate impact on Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander people. And then over the next sort of 18 months, 2 years, the other states and territories that are kind of heading towards that direction will do the exact same thing. So you're right, it does set a really dangerous precedent. And it is really concerning about that, what that means for kinship care and how Aboriginal communities and Torres Strait Islander communities across the country support our kids and support our families in situations of crisis or in situations of child removal.
The Albanese government needs to show national leadership on youth justice, because if it doesn't, effectively what could happen, or what is already happening, is that there's assimilation, and that funding and budgets are not actually going to be reflecting community-controlled Aboriginal organisations anymore. It's all going to be about mainstream rhetoric.
Yeah, absolutely, and that's what we're really calling for and have called for a really long time, is that we need our politicians who have said time and time again that they really care about Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander communities to kind of put their money where their mouth is, and take real tangible steps, to show leadership and to show that, we're not just political kind of gotcha points, but actually that, we are constituents, we are communities that matter, we're people that deserve justice, and the Albanese government really has the power and the ability to sort of step in and stop these things from happening, and yet they don't. So we'll continue making noise alongside, other Aboriginal organisations and community-controlled organisations and advocates who have been doing this work for a really long time and have been leading this fight for ages. We'll continue to walk alongside them and hold the government to account.
Maggie, thank you so much for coming onto the program. It's been great having you, and I'm hoping we can keep in touch and talk about this on an ongoing basis. Are there any final comments that you wanted to make?
No, nothing further from me, Marissa, other than, it's always great to jump on 3CR and have a yarn with you about these things, and hopefully the next time that we catch up, things won't be so grim. Exactly.
Thanks a lot, Maggie. Much appreciated.
Thanks,
Take care.
Thanks, ta-da.
Bye-bye.
Hello, I'm Z the People from 47 Soul. You're listening to 3CR Community Radio, Free Palestine.
Do you have a few children's picture books or footy boots that your kids have outgrown but want to find them a loving home? Well, drop them in at 3CR and put them in the Books and Boots bin. Books and Boots regularly sends pre-loved children's picture books and sports footwear to remote and regional First Nations communities and children across the country. Contact us at Books and Boots or go to the website www.booksandboots.org.au. We love a good book.
And we're just about ending our show now. And thank you to Maggie, who was our last interview, Director of First Nations Justice at the Human Rights Law Centre. So it's goodbye from Marissa. Stay tuned every Monday from 4 till 5 for the Dointime show. And we'll be going out now with our theme song, Black Fella, White Fella. Bye.
Color, as long as you a true fella, as long as you a real fella. All the people of different races with different lives in different places. It doesn't matter what your name is. We got to have lots of changes. We need more brothers if we're to make it. We need more sisters if we're to save it. Are you the one who's gonna stand up and be counted? Are you the one who's gonna be there when we're shouting? Are you the one who's always ready with a helping hand? Are you the one who understands this family plan? Black fella, white fella, a yellow fella, any fella, it doesn't matter what you color, as long as you a true fella. All the people of different races with different lives in different places. It doesn't matter which religions, it's all the same where the ship is sinking. We need more brothers if we're to make it. We need more sisters if we're to save it. Are you the one who's gonna stand up and be counted? Are you the one who's gonna be there when we shout it? Are you the one who's always ready with a helping hand? Are you the one who understands this family plan? Stand up and be counted. Stand up and be counted. Are you the one who's always ready with a helping hand? Are you the one who understands this family plan? Are you the one who's always ready with a
You've been listening to a 3CR podcast produced in the studios of independent community radio station 3CR in Melbourne, Australia. For more information, go to allthews.3cr.org.au.